We're live. What's up, guys? John Cintes here, Cutternation podcast, cast right low. Another amazing day. Let's see, what's today? The 1st of July. Holy crap, we made it. I feel like yesterday it was March. I don't know what happened to the year. But that being said, our amazing guest to update us, Weston Germain, Mill City Throwing. How's it going, buddy?
Doing great. How about you guys?
We're doing good. We're doing good. I hope everything stays safe. It seems like people are trying to figure it out. I know we have some weird case spikes, but you gotta roll with it. You gotta stay smart.
2020, man.
The day of quarantine starting, or 2 days before quarantine starting, I had a conversation with Craig Clough of Diamond Baseball, and I hadn't talked to him since today. So that's a long time. That was like freaking 4 months ago. 3 months ago, 4 months ago.
It's crazy how fast the time has gone.
And so that was like 14 weeks ago?
Yeah, it was like 15 weeks ago, basically. So about 1 week after quarantine started is when I started this project. So it's been, like, when I think of it that way, it's been 15 weeks and time has flown by. It's crazy. When I started throwing over in the park, I was wearing a hoodie and sweatpants. And now I have to try to get out in the park early to throw because it's so hot all the time. It's been a weird time.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
Sounds like it. So last time you were on, you updated us on your plan, your approach with the program that you're going through. Why don't you just quick update from the beginning and just catch us up on the new information? I'm real excited to hear about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a quick recap of what we've been doing. Essentially, since quarantine started, I have been testing an interval throwing program, basically that's been designed for rehabbing an injured overhead throwing athlete. So specifically, if you're coming back from Tommy John surgery or a Tommy John bracing, something along those lines, using a MODIS sleeve. So I'm putting on the MODIS sleeve, going to the park and throwing the prescription for what is like a traditional interval throwing program where it prescribes a number of throws at a number of distance. You throw essentially every other day, and then it progresses your load up over time. So I'm testing that, and I'm also testing a program that we designed that's based on specific workload data, like measuring your one-day workload and gradually increasing that using an objective metric rather than just guessing at the stress of certain distances and certain amounts of throws. So we've been kind of evaluating those, and we're evaluating those programs through the lens of acute to chronic workload ratio, which is essentially taking chronic workload, which is the workload that you've experienced over the last 28 days, an average of that, and acute workload, which is the average workload you've experienced over the past 9 days. So it's like a fatigue measure and a fitness measure and looking at the ratio there. And so basically what you want is your acute to chronic ratio to be below 1.3. And so we're just kind of evaluating both of those programs to see how they track over the course of 14 weeks and just kind of evaluating them and deciding, can we do this better? Is there a better way to return from injury and through these throwing programs? So when we left off, it was week 9 and I just wrapped up week 14. So
something that just came into my head was where the industry's at right now, what the kind of things that you're doing. We kind of talked about how that first month is kind of that there's issues with the idea of the first month, right? And so the value really comes into doing this over months and months and months and months with hundreds and thousands of people, right? And we had Arnel Aguinaldo on yesterday, and that was one of the conversations that we had. Was we just need the volume. We just need these numbers to be happening. And I hadn't really thought about that with the MODIS. So I was just sharing that with you because it's a really helpful thing to understand for those coaches out there that might not be inclined to be picking up a MODIS sleeve. Technology. I don't need technology. And it's but for the greater good, we'll actually be able to figure this out if everybody starts doing it. And it's Don't we need that togetherness right now?
Yeah, the additional data. I mean, the more the data bank grows over time, the more experience. Like, because what we're going to find out is like AC ratio is not perfect. It's not the end all be all of like injury prediction, but it gives us an objective framework to kind of progress.
But it's
workload.
better.
Exactly,
it's better. Than, right.
And the only way that we're going to get to better than that is if we work on AC ratio. If we just say AC ratio isn't perfect, so we're not going to use it, then we're never going to improve AC ratio to the next level of thing. And to your, just speaking to your point real quick to clarify the 28-day, like why it's not great for the first month is because the chronic workload takes 28 days. Like you have to have a 28-day average of workload in order to like establish your chronic fitness. So in like the first 14, 21 days, there's some formula changes that can happen to give you a pretty good guess, but really like it starts being incredibly accurate after 28 days of workload data, just for clarification there.
Yeah, and I think it's so good for us to be having this conversation because when I'm hearing that, I'm like, okay, so just needing to be so conservative on the front end with players and like having more conversations with just a lot of people are the volume at the lower intensity is really the sweet spot, you know. You have to have the max capacity, you have to know where that red line is, but to be able to like handle that is the key and be able to like there's so many benefits of ramping up to that, you know. And natural ball player Cordell Green on ramping, you know, it's in all, he overuses it, you know, he's so clear that this is going to be an on ramping phase, you know what I mean. And anyway, I'm just trying to keep it global as well while you go here, so I'll shut up and let you go where we are. Okay, go ahead.
Well, no, so I mean that's the huge point of this is that, and it's a little bit jumping ahead to what's next, but that's all right. Like, but if we can decide on a framework that's really good for injured athletes to use coming back, a structure, a framework, then like that's going to be applicable to a healthy athlete too. It's just going to be quicker. Like the fact that with an injured athlete, we have to worry about how much stress are we exposing to them to early on. Like that threshold's a little bit higher if it's a healthy athlete. But the general principles of the framework are going to be the same. And so if we can figure out a better way to rehab people from zero after an injury, we're going to have a better way to on-ramp people from zero after just a shutdown period when they want to get back to it. So it's definitely going to be applicable across the board once, you know, people start using that tech and kind of taking that data into account.
Yeah. All right. Let's get into it. You told us you kept us up to date to week 9. Now we have all 14.
Yeah. So I think I mentioned this when I was on last because I could kind of see it coming. But in the traditional interval throwing program, they hadn't really done a whole lot to build chronic workload up until that point. On May 20th, when we last spoke, the highest one-day workload that program had exposed my arm to was a 3. And for example, that's like, I could probably do that in 65 to 70 throws at like, I don't know, 75% maybe. Like that might be high, but it's not a really high intense workload day to have a 3 workload unit day. Since then, so in the past 5 weeks, it went from 3 being the highest workload to 37 being the highest workload that it exposed me to. So it went from basically not like a full-on recovery day, 3 one-day workload, to 90 pitches at 100% off of a mound in 5 weeks. Whereas the program that we put together, the in-house program, went from 9 on week 9. We had a 9 one-day workload up to 17 at this point. So like less than a 50% increase compared to, I don't know, 12 times the increase in one-day workload. So what happened was the traditional throwing program didn't really build any fitness, but then in order to say your return to throw, like your return to competition, they have to like get you to game ready. So if you actually look at the chronic workload graph, it's like basically flat, and then it just spikes right at the end because they try to make up all this ground at the end, and they do. I mean, the chronic workload for that program ended up almost double the chronic workload of our program that we designed. but they do so at the expense of 3 straight weeks of AC ratio spikes, because it's not a safe rate of increase for workload. They spent 24 days over a 1.3, and the AC ratio was over 2 for a large portion of that. So like just throttling the workload. And so then you just have to decide as a clinician or as an athlete or as a coach, like, are we okay with that type of risk at that point in the throwing program? Because they essentially expose the athlete to the highest rates of fatigue and the highest injury risk through the AC ratio lens when they were just starting to throw hard for the first time. So it was extra fatigue, it was extra torque, it was all like every other day of throwing. And so I would argue that that's not a great setup. I wouldn't normally ask a healthy athlete to throw 90 pitches off a mound at 100% on Monday and then do the same thing on Wednesday.
Okay, so when you say standard, standard is what?
Standard, what do you mean?
Protocol.
So the traditional interval throwing program.
Oh yeah, traditional, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying that because we're using the one that was found on the ASMI website, but there are so many iterations that are laid out the same way.
Basically the same thing. Yes. Okay. So this is my point: is the ASMI is the standard, like the gold standard of what you're supposed to be doing right now. Correct?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's where a lot of people turn. I think that's why there's so many programs that look. I mean, there are programs that a PT will put out their own program, and you look at it, and there are sections that are copy pasted off of this product. Like the wording is the same, and they change just a little bit here and there, but the framework is the same.
Right. And so here I am, like, so, it's just the panel of people that Arnell yesterday, he's compiling in the science thing, they're coming together to really do better science in biomechanics. But a lot of them are ASMI people. And so that's fine, and I'm recognizing that I need to take away my whatever bias when I'm thinking about these things, because those kind of people are going to do things that propel this industry forward in one way, shape, or form, just like the things that we're talking about. So I say these things with all due respect, but I also say them as like I'm noticing, right? I'm noticing the influences in the industry. I'm noticing where the authorities are. So I'm painting this picture a little bit just because it's interesting to talk about, but also so people realize that nobody is doing anything about this, right? So when I know Weston is the last person to sit and brag about himself, but like literally nobody's doing this, and it's just unbelievable, you know. So when we hear Arnell talk about it, you need the difference there is where's the marker biomechanics lab market. Right? Like you can't just go do that. You can't just go make that. It's just such a huge time commitment, money investment, like yada, 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 in so many ways. That's why you have to be a scientist to publish on it. Right. And so we did bring up the wearables yesterday, and it's like, this is data. No, bad data is better than no data. And it's just like everybody needs to be doing this for that reason. And it just went off in my head. So I keep coming back to it because I hope we're hearing this message is like, okay, this is just the beginning. Now, like, more people need to be thinking about their throwing like this. If you're a little leaguer, listen to this stuff. You actually have to think about things like a schedule and quit listening to what your coach says about when you're going to throw and play. Like, do it by design. Throw by design, right? Like, put that on a freaking mug and drink out of it.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, like going back when you mentioned like Glenn Fleisig of the ASMI, like he has mentioned that the Modus sleeve is valuable technology before. Like, it's not like they're not discrediting it, and it's not like the Modus is recognized as being good data. I mentioned there are some people that had problems with AC ratio, but and there are people doing what I'm doing, but I think that what's unique is that most of those people are looking at it from a strictly a performance enhancement standpoint and like training economy and how do we do this. And I just got pulled into this field in a different area because I was looking at rehab. And I think that the people that are using the Motus sleeve in rehab are probably in organizations where they're not going to publish papers about it. Like if the Angels crack the code, if their team doc cracks the code on this, they're not going to publish a paper about it. And the general public is going to be left to use whatever has been published. So there are, like, I would be willing to bet money that there are professional organizations that are using a Motus sleeve in their rehab, but you're not going to read about it. So what we're doing, and I say we, Jamie was on the first time with me, is we're putting together an actual full-length, like, throwing protocol paper outlining how to use one-day workload and AC ratios to create this framework, hoping to kind of move the conversation in that direction. Now, granted, like we aren't the ASMI. We're going to put this out and people can read it and think what they want of it. But there's too much information available to keep guessing on this stuff. Whether you're guessing with an injured population or a healthy population, like we don't need to guess anymore. And so even if you only use some of the data, like you don't need to guess anymore.
Well, and it just the whole idea. The idea isn't even being executed, right? So anything that gets people to create a plan and execute it, right? I am all about, especially if it's going, it's going to contribute on top of that. But like, that's what's just so striking to me. So anyway, what else? You want to talk future stuff? Where are we at?
Well,
I don't keep notes well.
No,
could we break? I have a question for you. Could we? I want to go back to that spike, and maybe we could. The language seemed a little confusing right there, right? And maybe we could just rephrase it in just a more simple term, and maybe I could try to say it, and you could help me with it.
Absolutely.
The buildup over time is just too much too soon for what the protocol is right now. Is that kind of what it is? Basically, what we're saying, right? As far as like how the chronic is not, you have to stress the arm. Is that what you're saying? In a safer way, right?
Gradually. So
gradually,
what we see in our program that was designed with like based on one-day workload is you see a progression that's about like this.
Yeah.
Like, because we just know, and not that every single day is harder, but over time, that's what our chronic workload is doing. It is a nice gradual line. And what we saw from the traditional interval throwing program is like a very flat line for a very long time and then a spike.
Yeah.
So even if we had ended up at the same path, we would have ended up there, or at the same point, we would have ended up there two very different ways. And by avoiding that big jump at the end, you can have a safe gradual increase in workload rather than not much of anything and then a whole bunch at the end.
And I feel like correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like I was going to try to use my screen, but I feel like there's even like weightlifting concepts where you want to build up, deload, and then peak. So there's even other things from a performance standpoint that might be, spin-offs of the same progression.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
I forgot what I was going to say because Cass got me on that one. That was a good one. Well, it's interesting. Just thinking about the throwing protocol that I went through with down in Florida when I was back there after I hurt my arm, and so we talked about the crow hop that was so weird. I distinctly remember smoking my physical therapist in the chest who should not have been throwing baseballs with me from 20 feet away because it said I needed a crow hop, and I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, And so I remember the question. And you yourself, when you were training this, did you actually see a velo difference in the, as far as maybe hand speed? I'm not sure how the Motus measures that, but in the two differences of the approach, right? Was there any performance benefit to the gradual as well as opposed to the spike? And did the spike create a negative performance benefit?
So I wouldn't really be able to speak to the specific benefit of either one of the programs because I was throwing both of them. So like my body physically was handling the stress of both. So like if one person did that, like there may very well be. I would not feel comfortable. This is just frankly like if I had an athlete who was rehabbing and was going to use that traditional interval throwing program, I would not feel comfortable letting them do it. Like what I mean is there's no way I would let one of my pitchers who was returning from injury throw that protocol. Like there's no way. Because I don't want, like I said, I don't want my healthy pitchers throwing that hard that often. Like this is gonna, to answer your question, I think there's probably.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure. Yeah. I'm sure that the amount of throwing that's going into it, obviously, if you're throwing more, you're going to get more familiar. You're going to be able to throw the ball faster. There's a skill level increase to what's going on there. I was just interested if you saw some, outside and, maybe it was a feeling, I don't know. But to me, it just seemed like obviously with the gradual and the ability to throw a little bit more and feel better, then the consistency, the being comfortable, the way, I've been saying free space lately a lot with throwing, the ability to find these free space areas that feel really good when you're throwing.
So this is what I will say about the two programs, and I think we'll speak to that a little bit, is that the traditional interval throwing program only it only prescribes increases. So 50 throws at 45 feet to 75 throws at 45 feet to 50 throws at 90 feet. Like it's only going up and you're throwing every other day. So your workload really only increases day to day. And sometimes they're not very big increases. That is what it is. But within the program we designed, week over week, your workload is increasing, but you're not throwing more every time you go out. So you have those days where it's like, okay, I'm going to throw 4 workload units today, but I'm going to do that however I want. My arm wants to be nice and easy today, so I'm going to explore at 50%, see how it feels, get my work done and be done. And 2 days later, I'm going to throw a 17 workload day. And I'm going to have all the time in the world to get myself warm, to pull down, to get off of a mound. And I can do that how my body wants to. And I think it's not necessarily the program's progression over time that makes your arm feel better, but the fact that you can listen to your arm week to week. And so on those days when I would go out and throw my high workload day in our program, my arm pretty much always felt good because I was able to do what it needed before that, knowing, I've got a big day tomorrow. It wasn't, I've got a big day tomorrow, and then 2 days after that, I have another big day. And 2 days after, so I think you're absolutely right. Finding those spaces where an athlete can individualize and adjust to what they want to do and what their arm is feeling is huge. And I think pays dividends as far as how you feel then on those days where you need to get up to max intent.
I don't know how you get around not throwing your round because for that reason, like, it's just like Joe Rogan says, like once you get past like 30, like it's so hard to get back into shape, and 40, it's just like hell. He's like, so just don't get out of shape. And it's like the same concept of, you want to be able to throw, max 2 games in a week. And I always tell people, if you're throwing 3 games a week, you better be playing for a conference championship.
And you better be under 15 pitches.
Yeah, exactly. They better not be long outings, really.
Yeah.
It's
all of this. I'm sorry, Weston. I just had a little thought. It makes me think about like the free space idea and how I remember playing in Mexico and I threw 5 days in a row twice. And no velo drops, but inside of that week right there, like just amazingly lucky outings. Like I think the first one was like 6 pitches. The second one was like 9. Right. And so it was like, okay. And they're like, oh, you're 3 days in a row. And I was like, I've thrown 15 pitches in 2 days. I remember like arguing with our head coach. He's like, you're down today. I'm like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. Don't tell me I'm down. No, I'm not. And I remember day 5, we were going to sweep the week. And I was going to get all 5 saves in a row. And I was like, I'm going in. And he's like, no, you're not. I'm like, no, I'm fine. I'm absolutely. Now, of course, day 5, it was like, I think it was like 6, 9, 12, 10. And then it was like 20 because he put, finally ran out of timing and stuff from there. But I just think you remember being like, okay, this is risky. Like, I'm going to throw 5 days in a row. I feel good, but like, who knows what's going to happen? Because I just don't remember anybody doing it. you know?
Right. But here's the thing. Imagine like you may very well have been it might have been completely reasonable choices if you had a chronic workload built up that can sustain that. Like imagine not having to guess. Imagine if your coach could just say, when you come into him and say, I think I should be up today. And he says, yeah, like you're good to go. Like you're good for an inning. I'll give you an inning.
It's interesting that you say that, because one of the things that I saw in Mexico that I didn't really see in the States, and maybe you guys can help me out, especially being pitching coaches, you know, for your level, is the guys that I had 4 different pitching coaches, 2 of them the same guy when I was playing down there. 2 different seasons, same guy, but they all had the same system, and they would count 2 things for pitchers to track their workload through the season: bullpen pitches and then in-game pitches. And they would have a chart that you could go see on it. And so it would just rotate through the week. Like the day would end and then the next day it would just be slid over to the next in the mountain. And you could actually see the whole team, where it'd be like, I'd be over here like every day and then be a starter and just from there, but it would just be numbers. And it didn't really make sense to me. And then I remember asking him later about, well, how do you determine who's up and who's down? And they were just like, well, John, you can throw a lot. So I know that if you throw 30 pitches in an outing, depending on if those are stress pitches or not, then I know you could come back the next day, but you're probably going to be tired and you can only go an inning or 2. I feel like what you're saying, if this same concept were to apply, Cass brought up, wearing the markered suit during the game, right? And we know that stress in the game against another human it's a different thing. Is that something that you've run across too, like in-game stress to throwing session stress?
So I haven't had the opportunity really to have the sleeve on somebody in a game, but here's where I think that it's important to mention that, like, one, I think you would see higher torque values just from adrenaline. Like if you're throwing harder, it's going to be more stressful on your arm. That, like, in and of itself would lead to a little bit higher stress throws, but also like there's more things that contribute to stress, right? That the sleeve isn't like your elevated heart rate, like there are things that play into how much stress is going on in your body that aren't measured by the sleeve. There are people that are working on like integrating a whole bunch of this technology to give a better picture. But I think it's pretty widely accepted that like tie game, bottom of the 9th for a reliever, like those pitches are more stressful on him than his bullpen was the day before, even if he thought it was at 100%.
You said that so much better than I did. Thank you.
Well, I don't know how it gets accounted for. Like, and that's where heart rate monitoring. There's a lot of different things you can do to gauge readiness that we're kind of working on and sorting out. But yeah, I think it all has to be part of the picture, and that's where if people are like not really into AC ratio, it's like, well, it's not the whole picture. It's part of it. It's a component in this readiness piece and this on-ramping piece that like it shouldn't just be thrown out if there's 1 or 2 little like issues with it. So
I don't believe in launch angle swing. What are you talking about? Launch angles are a descriptive, like it's an adjective.
Right. Well, I had a conversation that the athlete that I'm working through.
It's not a verb.
Yeah. I told him, I said, wouldn't it be great if arm stress became as much of a hot button term as launch angle? Like every throw has arm stress already, like, but we're going to put a number on it. And then we're going to talk about like how, workload or whatever. Hopefully it becomes part of the normal like vernacular here in not too long. But
that's good stuff. Cause as you're going through, and I'm really just trying to think about my rehab experience and then all the throwing that I've done, and even how, Cass was talking earlier, I haven't stopped throwing since I got hurt, and I don't want to stop throwing. And so I'm very interested in to see what my chronic workload fitness buildup is, because like, it's just throw and throw and throw and throw and throw and throw. And like, I know the low effort throws there's no stress. The high effort throws, there's minimal stress, so it's interesting for your approach to this and how I think about just my general throwing as well, and the build up and understanding that part really about what you're the up part is obviously everybody wants to get here. Like everybody wants to get to peak performance, whether it's endurance, it's, you know, the top velocity power output for their, you know, and I don't think that I want throwing this to hot word, because I think that that's a, you know, that's a massively important thing. Like, can you build up your throwing session and long toss for
What's a massively important thing?
just throwing fitness? Throwing fitness.
Oh, yeah.
The freight. Did it cut out? Yeah. Because you know, when we go long toss, it's more of a time thing, you know, and for me, I don't count the distance or the number of throws until I reach max distance, right? Because that's my gauge, I guess you could say, right? And so there's a little bit of a trial and error. But if you can have a thing that throws, you know, and you know what it is, like, not real hard to pair a bunch of, you know, technology devices like a pitch logic ball, Motus sleeve, a camera, and start collecting your own data so you can see what it is to you. You know, maybe your chronic stress load isn't from there. So, you know, appreciate it from the baseball community, because this is, you know, very, very quality information. I can't wait to check out the website and see what the updated information you have on it too.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, it's been fun. I feel like I've learned like quite a bit that's going to be able to be applied in a number of ways moving forward. Like that, when you talk about the off time, like don't ever get out of shape. Like I know a lot of people that have, because of the problems that on-ramping can cause, like they don't want their athletes to shut down because they know that the on-ramping from zero is a minefield. But having this objective data, you can say, okay, well, we're going to deload. We're going to take your chronic fitness down a bit, but you're going to keep throwing so that then the on-ramp is easier. Like it can go more smoothly. So it gives you all sorts of options. It gives the 12-year-old that is going to take a shutdown period, it gives them the option to have an objectively safer on-ramp period that's guided by metrics, but it also gives you the ability to throw year-round potentially and know where you're at a given time.
Yeah.
Here's a real simple idea. Why don't we list a bunch of things that are not baseball or not softball that are throwing sports that they can do in these off times that are different implements, right? So football, dodgeball, volleyball, like these are real things. Even like, I mean, you're not going to practice throwing a soccer ball, but you could. You'd be real good. Hey, I'm that guy on the team to throw it in.
You got to throw it with two hands.
Yeah, I know.
What about that goalie? The goalie like bowler move.
Oh yeah, that one.
I got a cousin in college that threw it like half the field one time. I saw it. I was like, dude, we got to get you on the bump quickly. Like, come.
Yeah.
What is going on over there, Johnny? You're going blurry. Your internet's bumming out.
Wednesdays.
Dude, I thought you were big league over there. Rednecks days.
Anyway, so Cass said future, right? Did we go into that? Like, what's the next? What are we doing next here?
Yeah, so I guess aside from I mentioned briefly that we're going to be putting out a full like program that is based on this stuff for people to use. I think probably the next things that I'm going to start looking into and testing are going to be like on-ramping programs for a healthy athlete. So like finding starting points for athletes that shut down for a month or more but aren't injured. So because we can start them further along, you know, than an injured athlete. So looking at those progressions, and then I also want to start testing one-day workloads of like velocity programs and seeing like trying to be able to put an objective number to, if you're going to do X velocity program, you should have this chronic workload beforehand so that you can handle that stress without seeing a spike. But there's also still some work to do in just creating a better interval throwing program for injured athletes. Like there are changes that I have to make. In the upcoming week or so, I'm going to be writing full-length like summaries of the traditional throwing program and ours, things that went well, things that didn't go well, and kind of changes we can make moving forward. So those types of things should be coming soon.
Really exciting stuff, dude.
Yeah, it is, really, and it's. I'm biting my tongue over here. I mean, because that's something that we can do. We can do better, right? We can bring kids in and be like, hey, if you're going to do our program, you have to commit to 6 weeks because that's all our program. That's what it takes, right? You can't do this without. You have to earn this. You know what I mean? And it's not just valuable to have them there for that long. It's valuable because that's the right way to do it. And we're really just fighting to find the way to how do we have to serve it for our people to understand how they should be consuming it, right? Because it should be kids hang out at our place 3-4 days a week. And, and we've had this to a degree. We've had college kids that will be in the summer league in San Diego, come in before their start, do their arm care, get gunned up, get them, just hang out, you know what I mean? And treat it like a professional. But, that's what it is. And whether we want to acknowledge it or not, a lot of people have some serious aspirations to play pro ball at a really, really young age, especially in Southern California. And it's like, okay, well then, if you want to treat it like a professional, then treat it like a professional. But don't have these aspirations and then fall so short in keeping yourself healthy because there's some dissonance there. So yeah, it's. I mean, so what's your gut on? You have a kid off the street, the average kid, especially after quarantine, right? Like, take the average, let's say 10-year-old right now. Like, what should they be doing if they haven't thrown in a tournament yet? If they haven't, like, let's say they've thrown a ball, let's just say once a week, throughout the thing.
So if this is what I would do, and I'm not, this is my gut. This is what I would do. If I had an athlete that I was going to start training that was going to wear a Motus sleeve maybe, and had been throwing once or twice a week, whatever, I would essentially say, I'd put the Motus sleeve on him and I'd say, show me how much you've been throwing. Like when you've been going out and playing catch, what does that look like? So that I can get an idea of like, what's the workload that he's been putting on his arm without even thinking about it. Because if that's what he's been doing, like, and then you can either use that as a starting point, or if you can see it as being like, well, this is like making me uncomfortable how much it is. If you've only been throwing once a week, you can adjust from there. But it would give you an idea of a starting point, and then just kind of program out from there. Like, I would say if they've been throwing once a week at X volume, probably moving to 3 times a week with one of those days being pretty low. And going from there, but like, I just don't really like the idea of guessing anymore. It's like, it's becoming more and more difficult for me when guys reach out to me about programming and they want to get ready for a start. With the quarantine that we had a bunch of guys that were in limbo for months, and now Minnesota announced we're starting summer ball. So I have a lot of guys that are like, Coach, we're going to play games. We're going to start games on July 3rd. And it's like, well, how much have you been throwing? How intense? For how, like, and I think it's made my guesses better because I know what patterns these programs follow now, but it's also made me uncomfortable with guessing, just because you don't have to. So I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, to be honest with you, because I used to be a lot more confident. Like, I used to think, well, traditional knowledge would say throw 3 times a week, then 4 times a week, then
no. Well, what I'm
every
curious
day
about is like,
yeah.
because that you just described exactly what I would do. I mean, but that testing is a spike, right? And so you have to essentially, like, with a sleeve, without a sleeve, is you're figuring out where that spike is. And so go ahead.
Well, the day one wouldn't necessarily be a spike if that's what they've been doing. So like if they've been throwing every Monday and you have them on a Monday and you say, show me what you've been doing, then that would be their average workload for the last month.
Sure, but it's a spike because you're there. I mean, I didn't realize how I was saying it, so I totally agree with you hypothetically. And then I'm like, my counter is no, it's definitely a spike because they're going to do a little more because of where it is, and it's either going to be in anxiety, right, a higher stress situation, or I'm going to show off how hard I can throw, right? It takes both of those things. So not to say I'm right, you're wrong, just kind of thinking out loud about how that would probably happen. So my point is I think these spikes are inevitable. and I think that's part of the thing. And it's like whether you, like I'm guessing right now. I'm like let's just admit it. So, but I'm not in the sense that I'm communicating, right? So I'm making sure that I have a very clear communication, and we watch the radar gun, right? So, at one point, just like learning from John and having the confidence to believe what I was seeing, I was like, dude, we see pain, we see discomfort, and there's a lot of truth to that. I know this is the path that you're taking, and that's okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. It's just that you know what yourself what it feels like when you feel nothing, right? We all know what. Hey, my arm is. I'm feeling it right now, and so we're paying attention to body language. We're paying attention to the radar gun, and then we're talking to them and making like you can see the arm shake. The arm shake isn't that felt great. Like I'm going to get like this is like, oh, what's going on there? Like what was that feeling? So it's again, it's all a piece of the pie, right? Like you've already mentioned this. So again, this is the purpose of us having this conversation in this podcast is so hopefully some of these parents and some of these families and players are hearing this conversation and thinking long and hard about how they're approaching their throwing fitness. So I don't know,
like a giant ad for Motosleeve too, right?
Yeah, I feel that way. Like when I'm putting stuff out there, I'm like, I'm not getting paid to do this, but like, there's no other product. Like this is the product that does this right now, and it does it well. Like it's been tested against biomechanics labs. Like it's a good product, and it's a valuable thing for a 12-year-old or 12 to 18-year-old and their parent to like be able to look at the stuff a little bit more holistically than a pitch count does with objective data, because there are a lot of people that like just don't know how to navigate all of that. The parents weren't baseball parent people, or they were, but this is all new. They didn't do travel ball. I mean, the whole game has changed, and so even if you did grow up playing Little League, like it's not the same anymore, and it's just a tool that can help kind of guide those decisions and help parents be more informed.
So think about this in your baseball bag. Okay, you have a Motosleeve, you have a pitch logic ball, you have a pocket radar, okay, and you have your phone. And the most expensive thing on there you already have. So we can take that phone off there, right? And so the most valuable thing people have, everybody already has it, and they're not using it. So let's go 5. Where's my hand? Okay, tripod, because people don't have tripods. It's like they're $30 for like a good sturdy tripod, right? And all of a sudden, like you have your own little data collection center, and maybe like we're talking under $1,000 right now, and you can really transform the way that you train, and yeah, it's like it's crazy.
It's never been more accessible. I paid like $450 in high school for a camcorder, like. So that I could watch 60 frame per second video of me doing something in my basement. Like the game is definitely like you can have such good tech for a reasonable. I mean, and pick 1 or 2 of those things even. But yeah, to do the whole load of it for under $1,000 is like it's never been more available.
Right. How much is a Motosleeve? It's not even
$150.
Right. It's like
for and the like. Again, it's going to turn into a Motosleeve commercial, but like you might outgrow the sleeve. The sensor is good. So when you outgrow the sleeve, you buy another sleeve for $20. So if I have a 12-year-old right now, I'm going to pay $150 for a sensor, and probably if I might be paying the same for a bat. The bat's going to last 1 year, maybe 2, because I'm going to change like whatever. The sleeve's going to last until he decides to stop throwing a baseball.
Dude, you went to Play It Again Sports for that $150 bat too.
Presumably,
because they're like $400.
No, I know. It makes me sick, but I was never a hitter, so I wasn't going to spend that kind of money on that. But
side note, I pride myself on breaking the expensive bats when we're pitching.
Yeah. So it's just it's readily available. I mean, I'll tell you, the Motosleeve. Go back to the commercial here, but it costs a lot less than PT does. Like it.
You know what? How about a couple of your favorite metrics on the Motosleeve that so that people don't like where do you go to first when you look at the data?
The most valuable thing to me is 1 day workload. Like if they wiped the app of every single other thing, but I could still go out and throw, and they could give me a 1 day workload, I would take it. After that, I want to see the torque, because I want to know, like, where are we on this athlete's progression? Like, did we get to top end, or are we about, like, just kind of where we are? Obviously, the calculations that it does then, the AC ratio, and all, like, that's great, but like if you have 1 day workload, you can calculate all that on your own. So 1 day workload and torque to me are where the money's made.
Makes a lot of sense too. Like if it's my kid and he's in the traditional travel ball world here in San Diego, he might play 4 or 5 games. You could really monitor the entire weekend and know right away when he's lying. Because we all know that they're going to lie to get to the championship game, and the coach is like, hey, how do you think he feels? And you're looking at your app going, nah, bruh, you already used him. We ain't doing it. Yeah, he's done. You can put him in right, but he ain't throwing, like, he ain't going to rip it.
This is the other cool thing is, like, you could get used to, if you did this for a while, you could get used to, when Johnny plays right field, his 1 day workload is a 3. Because he plays catch before the game, and he goes up to right, and he makes 2 throws out there, and it's low. When he pitches, it's a 40. Okay, well, I can start to plan, like, okay, you can pitch today, you can play shortstop tomorrow, you could play right, like, you could have an idea of where he's going to experience the most or the least workload and put people there accordingly. Like, that's a ways out, but I think that's, like, those are the things you.
No, I don't think it's a ways out at all for what you're saying. I think it's for what you're saying for the motor sleeve. I don't think it's a ways out. I think it's just like you're saying. You got to learn what your number is, and then if you know anything about baseball, and if you let's say you throw 2 innings, right? Like, you move that kid to shortstop for the benefit of the team, but that's not the best thing for the kid. And
no,
you can
okay,
prove
so
it,
let me paint this picture, because I've seen this so many times. I saw it in fall ball in Minnesota, and now I see it, like, I think it might be the norm here. Okay, so I'm looking at lineups and how these coaches are changing. And dude, kids are playing 4 positions in a game. 4. What are we doing? Like, so hopefully, okay, because I've been over here going, I mean, motor sleeve is here we go. This is in the right direction. It forces you into being like, today you're going to play 1 position. Tomorrow you're going to play another position. And there's going to be this interchangeability. It's not that hard to do it. Every big league team does it. Now, we're not going to have 9 pitchers. So, good. Now we have, it's just like, okay, everybody pitches. Even more reason why you play 1 position a day. And it's just like, when you're when you have the pitching, you can play 2 positions max. Like, 2 positions max. That's a really reasonable thing. I mean, if you took a little rule like that and you applied that to a little league, right? The implications are huge, right? People would, but I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I don't necessarily see a problem in moving positions, as long as you're not, like, pitching, catching, and shortstop. Like, I think there are some higher, like, as long as you can. Because
it's not fair to anybody. Because, okay, so sorry, what I had in my head and I didn't actually put to fruition is, like, okay, put yourself in game day. Okay, you're 9. You got to play 4 positions today. Like, and then the coach is like, Cass, you're supposed to be at second. I'm like, I thought I was on the bench. Like, give me my gum. Like, nobody manages these things well. I've never seen it done. There's nobody that orchestrates that well. So when I did fall ball, I'm dead serious. Now, I earned this a little bit, but I'm like, you guys are just going to play the positions that you want to play. Okay, and you have to sit 2 innings. Everybody has to sit 2 innings, and this is who's pitching today. Okay, can we handle this? Now, I could do that with 15-year-olds. I recognize that I would have to take more control of that with younger players, but I'm telling you, because when you talk about skill acquisition and the experience for the youth, like, talking about just, like, teaching them things that actually matter, right? These things actually matter. Playing shortstop for a day is something that they can comprehend. Playing all of the positions, they're existing in the game. They're not actively involved, right? And this comes from my experience of being from the middle of nowhere, getting to just show up and play. Like, as much as there was zero coaching, I had my same catcher for 6-7 years. Like, those kind of things are really, really important. So I that's what I think I'm fighting for, because you can do the same thing. You can do the same thing at the end of the year. I'm going to have the same amount of innings at each position for all my kids, however they want it, just like the other guy is. Okay. But they're going to have just this chaos every single game. And things like the Motus sleeve make you think about it logically and go, okay, my pitcher today has one other option, and that's going to be right field, or whatever whatever we figure out is his lowest workload day. And you just go down and you map it out like you would for a job. Like, it's so simple to do this for your kid. And the sad thing to me at the end of this is every parent has this skill and they're not applying it in the way, because every mom is schedule maniac, right? We got 17,000 activities and I have 5 kids and I get them there. It's crazy. Well, then do that for your kid's throwing program. Take one day out of your life. So there you go.
Rant over. Yeah, I agree. It's weird. I'm in high school. We only had 4 pitchers, and I distinctly remember going from the mound to first base to right field to shortstop, like in one game, and being like, 2 innings ago I was on the mound. How did I end up at shortstop here? Whose idea was this? Like, ball in the hole. I'm not quite sure if it's going to get there, but anything at me, I'm charging and flipping it underneath. That's the only way I'm getting it to first right now, right?
We used to love it when we would see, this was high school, but like we would see the starting pitcher from game 1 go over to third. We're drag bunting early. Like, this guy just pitched 7 innings. He took 20 minutes off to eat a sandwich. Like, we're gonna make him let one loose.
Yeah,
loose here.
Yeah, he's throwing a souvenir into the first base stands.
Exactly. And like, the fact that was a thing that as kids we recognized, but like people were putting him out there still. It's like, guy goes to catcher. Like, well, we're gonna run on this guy. Like, let's make him use it. And I mean, I don't know. It seems avoidable.
Public service announcement. Coaches, please do not have your pitchers catch after pitching, or your catchers pitch after catching. Okay? Nobody's got any legs. It's going to be death everywhere. To bet. I'm sure the Motus spikes would be crazy on those.
Probably. I mean, you'd have to have a significant chronic workload. And again, all that's taking into account is your elbow. It does nothing with your legs. It does nothing with your body's overall fatigue. So even if it says your elbow is in good enough shape to do it, like, I don't know, I'm skeptical. So
awesome. It makes me think about the soccer clubs and how big they're into data collection on the human performance side, and they wear those shirts that have all those sensors on it. Heart rate gives them all that. Tells them velocity when they're moving and everything like that. And I'm just wondering, when is Major League Baseball going to get on that level of? I mean, you see, I think in the most recent big soccer tournament they had, or whatever it was, I remember them showing like the heartbeats of the guys as they were running across the field, and like everybody's, and you could see like the dude that just went on the run was just like, and the other guy that's on the other side is just kind of going, and he's just like,
yeah,
he's just chilling.
There's so much, yeah, and actually the acute to chronic workload ratio research was started in rugby. I can't remember if it was rugby or soccer, but that's where it stemmed from, was GPS monitoring on rugby or soccer players. But yeah, there's so many pieces of the puzzle, and only going to learn more along the way. All
right, we're going to wrap it up. It's all good.
Yeah.
He's got to run, head over some remote training. Weston, this has been great, man. I really appreciate you updating on all of this. I can't wait to see how things keep going with stuff. So keep us in the loop, man. This has been great. I appreciate you, just buckling down on this. This is some quality information, and there's some questions and some problems that need to be, addressed here, because just like you said, like, rehab's weird, and if you haven't been in the rehab space before and you would come back throwing like hero like I was, where it was like basically I had massive trust issues on throwing again, because I didn't know, well, I don't know if this is gonna hurt. Is this gonna hurt? Is this the right or wrong way? I just have no idea. And I feel like this tool, if I had something like this that would be able to measure like that, it would just be tremendous to my own just confidence and understanding
Confidence
which way
in it,
I'm
yeah.
going. Right. Yeah,
Absolutely.
for
Well,
sure.
yeah, for sure. I appreciate you guys having me on a couple times to talk about it. It's been really good getting you guys' input and thoughts and just kind of exploring the topic. So I really appreciate you having me on.
Oh yeah, it's great, man. We love talking baseball, and you're a good dude. We love to help promote you. Mill City Throwing, guys, you got to go check them out in Minnesota. Weston's over there. Anybody in the area, especially people that are trying to think about coming, starting to increase their velo safely and understand what happens to the arm. I mean, I'm 34. I throw pretty much every day, but I guarantee you that my output of throws that I throw every day is probably under 50 every day, right? And even then we're not saying 50 max throws. Like yesterday I know for sure I didn't throw a ball over 80 yesterday, right? Entirely on purpose, but all his demonstrations inside of drills and stuff like that. And so it all of this stuff makes sense to me is what I'm saying. I know how I feel. I know how I need to feel on a good day. You know what I mean? Like, and getting to that point, right away as a starting pitcher, when you wake up and your game day and you wake up and you move and you go, worked way too hard this week, worked way too hard. Definitely not going to have everything today. Right. And so being able to take that idea from an anecdotal situation to an actual number situation that you can process is just so tremendous. So thanks again, man. I appreciate the update. We'll do this again as much as you want. You just let us know. And whenever you got an update, man, we'll just keep promoting you and get it out there. All right.
Awesome. Sounds good. Great talking to you.
You too, buddy. Appreciate it. Guys, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. You can sign up for the website, remote training. Stay safe out there. Hats, shirts. Let's see. I don't know if we have else. I think that's about it right now. So, all right, guys. Appreciate it.